Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men. Power Black men. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where my intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models in mainstream media. So my intention is to showcase and highlight Black men who are doing remarkable things in the world. And my guest tonight is doing just that. And rather than introduce him, I'm going to start off with a video that's actually going to do the introduction for me. So let me work some magic here.
Virginia's Teacher of the Year is from our corner of the Commonwealth. Anthony Swann, a fifth grade teacher in Franklin County, won the award in a virtual ceremony last night. 10 News reporter Taj Simmons stepped inside his classroom today to learn what sets him apart.
Any questions, comments? Anyone want to say anything?
Teacher Anthony Swann loves to motivate children at Rocky Mount Elementary School.
I don't just care for you in the classroom, I care for you outside as well.
More importantly, the kids in this classroom love Mr. Swann right back.
They find my room a safe haven and they have an open line of communication with me.
Swann is more than a special part of the school. He is now Virginia's Teacher of the Year.
Anthony Swann from Franklin County Public Schools. Congratulations, Mr. Swann.
Were you expecting that?
Never.
It's a miracle he became a teacher at all. Once you learn what happened in his childhood.
When I was in fourth grade, social services knocked on my classroom door to take me to a foster home.
He spent the rest of his youth in foster care, but his teacher's words that day inspired him to someday step in her shoes.
She grabbed me and she hugged me and she whispered in my ear. She said, Anthony, everything is going to be all right. It is very frustrating sometimes.
Life is better than ever for Swann, but he always teaches his fifth graders as if his younger self was sitting there with them.
I get on that level. I have never raised my voice at my children.
Swann's unique teaching voice stands out in Virginia, but he says the true honor is inspiring his children to succeed in life.
We often say Virginia is for lovers, but Virginia is for the influential as well, and that's through us teachers.
In Rocky Mount, Taj Simmons, 10 News working for you.
And now that Swann has won Virginia Teacher of the Year, he's in the running to be the National Teacher of the Year.
Well, without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Anthony Swann to the show. Hey, Anthony, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, fantastic, man. Again, you're one of the reasons I do this show, because we seldom see powerful, positive stories, especially of Black men. So that's why I wanted to reach out to you. So I want to, first of all, thank you for showing up for the podcast. And we're going to have a little conversation. But before we jump into your work and what you're doing, we're going to start off with a few icebreakers. So first of all, just tell us where you're from.
My hometown is Danville, Virginia. I currently live in Vinton, Virginia.
All righty. Now, name a woman who's inspired you to be who you are.
Mrs. Jaretta Wilson.
Now, would that be the teacher that told you everything was going to be okay you talked about in the video? Or is that someone else?
That's the teacher.
That's the teacher. It's amazing how teachers can have such a powerful impact on our lives. And I remember when I was in elementary school, I had a teacher named Miss Bussey. And Miss Bussey basically said what your teacher told you, because I didn't have Children's Protective Service come and take me to foster care, but I had several instances where CPS came and took me out of class because of scars on me.
Right.
And so, but I had a teacher, Miss Bussy, who would say the same thing, Michael, everything is going to be okay. And she told me and convinced me that the key to my success was my intellect. And
Wow.
she said, Michael, what you have to do is focus your attention on getting good grades. She says, that's all I want you to do. She says, I know how difficult things are, but you just make sure you focus on getting good grades. And from that moment on, I was a straight A student all throughout elementary school.
Wow.
Now, with that being said, name a man that you look up to and admire.
I have to be my godfather. His name is Robert Jenkins.
Okay, Mr. Jenkins. Now, if you were trapped on an island for 30 days and you could only take one book with you, what book would you take?
That book will be, oh, that's a hard question. I have several. um, Dr. Seuss, Oh, the Places You'll Go.
Oh, nice. one of my favorites growing up. Now, you like movies?
I do.
Name a movie you love and tell me why you love it.
um, hmm. Oh, Freedom Riders.
Ah, okay. Educator. I see that educator in you. Go
Yeah,
ahead. Go
I
ahead.
love that movie because you see the impact that a teacher makes with her students.
Yeah. Yeah. Great movie. Love that movie. Now, if I gave you a magic wand, and with this magic wand, you can create anything your heart desires, what would your life look like 10 years from now?
My life will look as though I would own my own home. My home would be built. Um, I would be the head principal of an elementary school. I will be the father of at least 2 children. And that's just to name a few.
Perfect. 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 Now, as a man who happens to be Black, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future in general?
I am very optimistic. I'm an optimistic man.
Good. Now, I wrote a book titled The Cure for Onlyness, a Black man's guide to joy, passion, and purpose. And in the book, I talk about the feeling of onlyness that we as Black men experience sometimes when we're in environments where we're the only person of color. And I'm certain you've probably had that experience. So I'm curious, how do you navigate those types of situations?
I used to be intimidated. I used to feel like that I had to quote unquote code switch um, until last year where I had an experience where I was with many state officials and I was the only Black man. And it just came to me, just be who you are unapologetically. And so now it's no longer an issue for me. I am who I am unapologetically.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, obviously, there aren't a lot of Black male teachers. So, how do you deal with that? I mean, do you ever feel isolated and alone as a Black male teacher?
Absolutely. I feel like that sometimes I feel like I have to work harder than the normal educator, not to prove who I am, but to not be looked down upon as if I'm an ignorant person of color. And so there are times where I find myself telling myself mentally that to make sure that I conduct myself as a professional at all times so I will not be looked upon a certain way. But one thing I've learned is that people will like you and people won't like you, and you can't change people's minds. So and you just have to be who you are.
Yeah, I love what I think it was Charles Barkley. He said, 50% of the people going to like you no matter what you do, and 50% of the people going to not like you no matter what you do. So you might as well not focus on the 50% that's not going to like you anyway. So
Right.
just be who you are. That really sums it up. So let's talk about winning Teacher of the Year. What was that like?
It was a very surreal moment, emotional. I'm fighting back tears as I think about it. Never expected it a day in my life. I'm not the type of educator that um, that does things to receive awards. Like, I genuinely love serving children, and so it's it's just surreal. Even when I think about it, there are oftentimes like I just will go downstairs in my home and I'll look at the awards that I received, and it's just like a surreal moment because I was not supposed to be in the predicament to receive any of those awards. And so I'm humbled, I'm honored. Um, so what would you like to know specifically?
Oh no, that's fine. So I'm curious, how does that process work? Who nominates the teachers for that? How's that?
So you have to be nominated, or you have to win Teacher of the Year for your specific school building, and the parents, students, as well as the staff vote um, unanimously. And so, right before the pandemic hit, March of 2020, I was voted for Rocky Mount Elementary's Teacher of the Year. And from there, they take you and all the other teachers of the year from across the district, from every elementary, from every middle school, from every high school, from across your district, and they put you all in this category, and they have a team of people um, that go through your credentials, and then those team of people will score each teacher of the year, and then they will the one who makes the highest score then becomes the district teacher of the year. And so that morning, where they were going to announce the district teacher of the year, I had a conversation in my car with myself. I had already prepared myself not to win. One, because I was the only Black. Um, Two, because I had only been teaching in this district for 3 years, and the majority of the other teachers of the year had already been in that county way longer than I had. Three, because from my background, I just felt like that they were not going to choose me, but they ended up choosing me to be the district teacher of the year. And from being the district teacher of the year, you did have to submit an application to the state. So when I submitted my application to the state, my sister had gotten sick in Atlanta, and I actually wasn't focused. So I ran over to an Office Max, and I completed my application in the Office Max, and I faxed it from Atlanta, Georgia. And then my district called me back, and they wanted me to change a couple of things, so I did that. Well, it had been put out of my mind, and so a few months later, September of 2020, my principal had sent out a Zoom, and the superintendent was requesting to meet with the whole school, and everybody was thinking it was COVID related. And he just announced that I had won Regional Teacher of the Year, which was so surreal for me. It was honestly surreal for the district too. They share with me that normally when they put the applications in, they never hear anything. And I was like the very first one in 30 years in this district to receive Regional Teacher of the Year. So I won Regional Teacher of the Year. and that puts you in the finalists for the state teacher of the year. So there are 8 finalists out of 100,000 teachers in Virginia, and they interview you at the state level. You have a 20-minute interview. They ask you questions, and from there, there's a committee that choose the top teacher that they feel like will represent the students and teachers in the state. And I had told myself they're not going to choose you. I felt like I had several factors against me. It's predominantly women's profession. I was the only male finalist. I was the only Black finalist, and I was the state teacher of the year from the previous year was from the same region. So I'd already told myself, you're the only Black, you're the only male, and they chose Region 6 last year, so they're not going to choose Region 6 again. And lo and behold, they chose me to be the state teacher of the year for 2021.
Well, that obviously speaks volumes about who you are as a teacher. And I think you started off perfectly when you said you love to serve children. And I think it's reflected, obviously, in this award because you were acknowledged for serving children, which is pretty freaking amazing, if you ask me. Now, I'm curious, though, how did your students react when they found out you won?
It was kind of surreal to them too. Like they were looking like, wait, what? You won teacher of the year again? Because I had won teacher of the year when I first won for the building, like they went wild. And so the next year I had a different set of students, because when I first won for the building, it was one school year. And then when I was announced as regional and state, it was another school year. So I had another group of students. So they just kept looking like, you won teacher of the year again? Like, really? But then when all the publicity and all the cameras started rolling in, they were really just in awe, like, wow. Some of them were able to actually be on national television and speak about how they felt about me. So that was kind of surreal for them. So it was a surreal moment for them as well. I had former students that I taught years ago. They are now adults and have children of their own. They started reaching out to me like, you deserve this. I'll never forget. And they were just telling me how I had impacted their life. So yeah.
That's amazing. That's what it's all about. Being in service and being acknowledged for being in service. That's what the award says for me. You are in service to children, which is awesome. Now, do they go ahead and have like a national competition next, or are you finished?
So they do. So they take all the state teachers of the year from across the country, from your cohort or from that particular year. And then they choose 4 finalists, and then they interview those 4 finalists, and then there's a committee that chooses the national teacher of the year. So my cohort is already finished, which was 2021. And our national teacher of the year was actually the first Latino woman from Las Vegas, Nevada, to ever win National Teacher of the Year in the history of the program in 70 years. And so her name is Juliana Urtubey. They call her Miss Earth, and I had a chance to travel around with her as National Teacher of the Year and just uplift our profession of teaching and serving children.
Mm. Now, you mentioned the teacher that told you everything was going to be okay. So tell us a little bit more about that teacher, because obviously she played a significant role in your life. So tell us a little bit more about her, and what was it about her that, again, gave you that inspiration, that motivation to deal with all the adversities that you were dealing with?
I tend to get emotional when I think about her.
And that's fine. That's absolutely okay.
I just at the age of 9, my mom was an addict and alcoholic, and my father has always been absent. And so that particular day, I'll never forget it. Like, I was sitting in class and social services knocked on my door and just was taking me away, and I had so many emotions, like I wanted to kill myself. I didn't understand. And she walked out and she was trying to talk to social services and they wouldn't tell her anything. And so finally she just stopped talking and she bent down and she whispered in my ear, Anthony, everything is going to be all right. And so after she said that, they took me away. When they took me away, I just started going downhill. Like I had developed an attitude, I don't care. Like nobody cares about me. I hate my life. Nobody understands. And she she later told me the story how she would drive around the city to search for me. And she found me while I was still in the system. And she had, heard wind of, how I wasn't doing well and how my life was just in shambles and I was getting suspended and I wasn't in a good space. And she met with me face to face. This was when I was in the 8th grade. And she said, Anthony, I want you to take hold of all your anger and your bitterness and your hatred. And I want you to make something of yourself. And by that time, I had started playing school because school was my way of escape of what I was experiencing in foster care. And from her saying those words, she planted a seed in me. And I took those words and I ran with them. And I started pulling my grades up. I stopped getting suspended. By the time at the end of 8th grade, I had the highest grade point average in 8th grade. And I went on and I learned how to advocate for myself in high school because I knew I didn't have parents and I was still in the system. By the time I graduated, I was the second person in my class to have the most scholarships. When I got to college, I put my own self through college with student loans and those scholarships. My senior year, my mom died. And I looked at my older sister and I was like, I quit. Like, everybody I loves leave me. Like, I don't understand. Like, I was just at a quitting point. My sister contacted my 4th grade teacher and she called me and she was like, Anthony, what do you need? Like, what is going on? So I was able to talk with her and be vulnerable. And I said, Miss Wilson, it's my senior year. I'm supposed to start student teaching. I don't have a car. My mom just died. I have all these emotions. Like, I don't know what to do. And she was like, Anthony, everything is going to be all right. And so my senior year of college, Miss Wilson picked me up every single day. And she took me to my student teaching placement before she went to be at school herself.
Wow.
And when I started teaching, in my teaching career, I went back to that same school I was taken from. And I was teaching 3rd grade, and Miss Wilson was still teaching 4th grade.
Oh, man. What a story. What a story. Well, again, what you're showcasing is what's possible for us as Black men. There are so many challenges that we have to deal with, and you've dealt with so many of them, but yet, as the guy in Antoine Fisher, I don't know if you saw the movie Antoine Fisher. I remember the line where he says, I'm still standing. And I think that's a powerful testament to you, that you're still standing despite all those obstacles, despite all those adversities. You were able to climb out of that and become the amazing man that you are, to become Teacher of the Year. Such an inspirational story. Such an inspirational story.
Thank you.
Now, with that being said, though, we hear a lot about the lack of Black male teachers. And as you mentioned earlier, teaching is primarily a female vocation anyway. And the fact that there are so few Black male teachers just tells us that we need to put more effort into providing more Black male teachers for young Black men to see, because it's obviously extremely important for them to see Black men as teachers. Because I know I went through all the way through high school and never, well, I had one Black male coach, but I never actually had a Black male teacher. But, the data shows without question that when students have teachers that look like them, they have better grades. I mean, it's been documented. So I'm curious from your perspective. So why do you think it's important to have Black male teachers?
It's very important. So many of our Black and brown students, especially the boys, have so many negative images that they've seen, whether on TV. Just some of them don't have good role models in their life. Just a couple of experiences that I've had. Maybe 6 years ago, I was teaching, and I was teaching 5th grade, and I had this student, Black young man in 5th grade, and he looked at me and he said, one of the very first days, like, why don't you write me up? Every other teacher has written me up.
Wow.
I'm ready for the referral. And I looked at him and I said, I don't write children up unless I have to. I will exhaust all measures. And with this student, I did. I ended up making home visits. But we had developed such a relationship, and to the point where he honestly became like my child. His mom was a single mom, and 2 years ago she called me, and he had, long gone, but I stayed in touch. And his mom called me, and he was having a really rough time. And I called him, and he was like, Mr. Swann, he was like, what's wrong with me? Like, how come nobody don't want me? My father don't want me. People I look up to, they end up leaving me. And then he says, Mr. Swann, please don't leave me. And we were crying. And at this time I was engaged, and my fiance was in the room while we were having this conversation. It was just really emotional. And I hung up, and she looked at me and she said, you look at him as your son, right? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, he needs to be in our wedding. So I called his mom back, and long story short, he was in our wedding, and to this day, we're still in contact. Just last week, I had a 2nd grade student as I was in the cafeteria, and he kept looking at me. And then finally I walked over, and he said, Mr. Swann, your skin is brown like mine. And I said, is that a good thing? He was like, yes, sir, it is. So now every time he walked past me, he always looks me up and down. And so that provides the hope for those students who don't see hope in their lives, who don't see a positive male role model in their lives. When I first became an assistant principal, one of the 3rd graders were having such a hard time. And the principal and the other leadership team came to me and told me how one of the Black male boys who was having a hard time, when his teacher asked, what did he want to become? He told her, I want to be a principal like Mr. Swann. They said he had never said anything else like that until I got into the building. And so having that representation for those students, it matters. It gives them hope, especially when they feel like there's no hope around. So that's why it's important for me to be a great representation to those children, because I know that it was a teacher who saved my life, and I want to do the same thing.
Yeah, and I think, one of the challenges I think that's really missing in our educational system, and our system definitely isn't designed for this. But I think more than ever, what we need emotional curriculums built into the school system
Hmm.
that helps young people deal with the emotional challenges and struggles that they're going through. Because I remember when I was 6 years old, I was separated from my mom. I had to go live with my grandparents, and so very traumatic experience for a 6-year-old to be separated from his mom, right?
Hmm.
So, the experts will tell you it creates abandonment issues. So I had a lot of abandonment issues because the woman that I loved more than anything in the world, you know, took me to live with somebody I didn't really know. So in my little 6-year-old brain, I concluded that my mom didn't love me.
Yep.
So that's kind of how the mind works. And so I think it's important for us as a society to really reevaluate our whole school system and understand that the foundation of learning can be connected to how a child feels about themselves.
Absolutely.
If a child doesn't have high self-esteem, he's not going to learn. If a child feels unworthy, unlovable, unloved, they're not going to put a lot of effort into learning because
Hmm.
they're dealing with all the other emotional traumas that they're going through. And without question, environment has the largest impact on a child's mental and emotional well-being. And
Right.
so we have these kids that are in these situations where, for example, a gang. What is a gang? A gang is simply a surrogate family. These kids are just reaching out, trying to feel accepted and to be a part of something, be a part of something that they're not getting at home. And so it's important, I think, for the system, if you will, to kind of rethink how we teach our kids. And when it comes to young Black boys, especially, we need to give them space for them to learn how to be in touch with their emotions so they can process them authentically and appropriately.
Right.
Because a lot of times what we see is when we see these young men that are acting out, with negative behavior, if you will, and in most cases it's expressed as anger, but in reality, what a lot of these young men are feeling is fear and sadness.
Hmm.
And they don't know how to process that, but they can process anger. So they act out in anger.
Right.
So again, it's so important for our young men to have those teachers and mentors that can support and empower them to recognize that, number one, they're not alone, because that's what most of them feel. And number two, that someone cares about them.
Hmm.
And again, that's why I think it's so important, especially for young Black males, to see Black men that care about them. Because I know from experience that just caring for someone can change the trajectory of their lives. Just
Totally.
having that someone that can say, "Hey, look, I'm here for you in whatever way I can be." Um, so powerful. So I want to back up a little bit though, Anthony, just a little bit. And you've been through a lot of challenges and so forth. So tell me a little bit about Anthony in high school. What were you like in high school?
I was a total nerd. I I put all my efforts and all everything that I had, I put it in books. I deal with I did what Miss Wilson told me. She said, put it towards making something of yourself. And so I just became such a total nerd. I was such a nerd until the popular kids would not let anyone bother me because they knew if they needed help with academics, they could always come to me. And so when people would try to bother me, the popular kids will take up for me. My senior year, there was this there was this teacher who allowed the students to cheat. And I went to my guidance counselor and I was like, nope, I don't want to be in this class because I want to earn my grade. And I had my class switched because I didn't want to cheat. I was on senior skip day, I was the only one in class because I didn't want to skip class. Like I was just such a nerd. It paid off, but I love school. Like I, I love school. If I could sleep at school and live at school, I really would. Like I love school. If something's bothering me, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go to school. That is, and that is how I was such a nerd. In my senior year in high school, I had a rolling book bag. The ones with wheels, I had one of those going down Central Hall. I was the only senior with that book bag. But that is the Anthony High School. I got my first job when I was 16, um, working at J.C. Penney, and I never sagged my pants. And I walked in for the interview, and the manager was like, I'm calling the store manager right now and telling him we need to hire you because I love the way your appearance is. And so I just was, that's, I've always wanted to be a teacher. And so I conducted myself in that way. Like I didn't hardly wear jeans. I wore khakis and a button-up shirt or a polo shirt. Like I kind of put in my mind, I have to prepare myself for where I'm going. So when I get there, I won't have to scramble around. And that's kind of the mentality that I have.
Interesting. Now, for me, slightly different in that I was actually would probably would have been called one of the cool kids, but I didn't let my friends see me reading books and studying because to me, it was more important to be cool and to fit in and to not be nerdy, if you will. But I've always loved books. So I never allowed my friends to see, because I was reading books. Like when I was 13 years old, I read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Wow.
I'll never forget reading that book because I've known since I was 10 years old what I want to do in my life. I've always known I want to be an entrepreneur. I knew it. I started my first company when I was 14 years old.
Wow.
When I was in high school, I had 3 different companies. And again, I did all this without letting my friends see me studying and learning. But they always knew that I was the one that always had money. I was the first one of my friends who had a car, and whenever, my friends were, in trouble, they knew they'd call me because I was the guy that could help them out.
Right.
But it's interesting because in a lot of ways, I dumbed down around my friends to fit in. I watched what I said. I didn't use big words, if you will, because I didn't want to be called out, right? Be nerdy.
Right.
And I'm wondering, as a teacher now, do you think that's still an issue? Do you think some of our young men are still dumbing down just to fit in with their groups? You think that's still a thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I see it all the time. Or they will try to portray that they're not smart when they're really smart because they don't want anyone to think that they're smart because they'll be picked on. And so when that happens, I normally just encourage the boys, especially the boys, like, so what? Like, be who you are unapologetically. Like, because at the end of the day, guess what? You're the one who's in charge of where you want to go with your life. So I kind of try to spin it on them like that. 9 times out of 10, it has worked and caused them to kind of flip their mindset to say, okay, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to study and be the best I can be. I have had a few students who are like, nope, I'm not going to portray that I'm smart because I don't want anybody to think that because I don't want to be talked about. And so just helping them to change the narrative in that way has been one of the things that I've been hoping to do through the years. And it's worked some, but then you have those students who are just determined not to portray themselves in that way. And so they'll continue to act like they're smart.
Yeah, and there's still also, unfortunately, that idea that being smart is acting white. And I know that again,
Mm,
this was in the 70s. Um, and I'll never forget my friends. They used to call me white boy because number one, I had a surfboard in my bedroom because I used to surf, and
wow.
they didn't have any black kids surfing. But I had that whole idea of you sound white, because of the way I spoke, because of the words
Right.
I used, and so forth. And I know that's still an issue that our young men have to deal with. This whole idea of equating intellect with being white.
It is. I've had parents to tell me when they meet me in person, "Oh, I thought you was a white man."
Yeah.
I've had them to tell me that, and I don't take offense to it.
Right.
I look at it as if it's a win for the black and brown community because you're often thinking that it's a white person that you're on the phone with, but when you see me, like you seem so shocked. Even being in an AP in a new community, when they meet me, they look shocked, like, "What? You're the assistant principal? Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
didn't know that." So
Now, as a teacher and administrator or assistant principal, I'm a firm believer in what you familiar with the motivational speaker Anthony Robbins. You know Anthony Robbins?
I don't.
Yeah, he's a guy that you see on these infomercials, and he does all these workshops about personal power and personal growth and development. And he said something that I think is pretty important. He said the key to success is what he calls CANI, which is an acronym for constant and never-ending improvement.
Hmm.
Constant and never-ending improvement. And I know without question that is the key to my success because I am constantly asking myself, how can I become better? I'm constantly reading books, doing workshops, learning, listening to audio programs, enhancing my mind the best that I can. And so, as an educator, what do you do to keep your mind sharp?
That's a really great question. Something I always tell myself is to always remain teachable. Like no
Mm,
matter how many degrees I have, um, always remain teachable. Like someone knows something more than you do. One of my very first assistant principal, which I actually talked to him last week, and he told me when he did my very first evaluation, he said, "Anthony, I'll never give you a perfect evaluation." And I kind of felt offended. I was like, wait a minute, why not? Like, I'm a phenomenal educator. And he explained to me, he said, if you get a perfect evaluation, you'll never have room to grow. You always want to have room to grow. And the greatest room that any of us can be in is the room of improvement. And so I make sure that I glean. Um, Even being an assistant principal, I still make sure that I glean from my teachers when I go in the classrooms and I'm watching their methods and how they do different things. I'm I'm participating in the lesson. Like today, I raised my hand in the lesson because the way that the teacher was teaching it, it was something I've never seen before. So making sure that I stay teachable is a way that I make sure that I improve. I also make sure I stay up to date with what's the current issues that are happening with education. I make sure I stay up to date with those so I know how to advocate for this profession, not because of um, not because I just want to make a name for myself, but when you are a state teacher of the year, you're always a state teacher of the year. And so you are looked upon to advocate. You become an ambassador within the state for as the profession is concerned. And so I want to make sure that I stay current on the educational issues so I'll know how to advocate and speak up for those teachers that are afraid to speak up. And so those are some of the things that I do. I'm always looking for ways to grow. I'm always My principal that I'm serving under, she is a very reflective leader. And so she teaches us as her leadership team to always be reflective, always see how you could do something better, always see if you made the mistake in the situation so that you can come back and apologize if you were the one that was wrong. So she's taught us to always be reflective. And so those are some of the things that I'm currently doing.
Now, as an assistant principal, do you miss being in the classroom full time?
Absolutely. Like that's why, like today, the office really wasn't busy per se. I was in classrooms. I went to fourth grade. I stayed in fourth grade. I went to second grade. Like I miss that. And every opportunity I get, I'm asking, okay, I'll teach after school. I'm speaking up in the leadership meetings like, okay, you need a teacher. Okay, I can do it. And my principal's like, really? And then she's like, okay, Mr. Swann's gonna be one of the tutors after school. Like I love being in the classrooms. I love serving children. Like that is my, I know that that is my purpose for life, is to always serve children. And in every which way I'm looking like to, I just love being in the classroom. I even go in the room sometimes and tell the teachers to take a break if they need it. Like, I got your kids. And so that is just who I am.
That's awesome. Now, for those who may be watching this and they're thinking about, maybe I'd like to be a teacher. This guy apparently loves teaching. I'm sure he can give me all the tips because he loves it so much. But what are some of the challenges that teachers face? Now, for example, I don't remember reading where I read this, but I remember reading something that said, teachers were having to pay for their school supplies because the school districts didn't have enough money. And I thought, what kind of country are we living in where our teachers don't have the supplies to teach? And it just really kind of ticks me off to think that, we talk about how much we love our kids, but yet our teaching profession, we treat, it's like at the bottom of the priority scale. And so I'm curious, what are some of the challenges that a teacher or a person might have to deal with in becoming a teacher?
Great question. One of the challenges is it depends on where you work in your school climate. Some teachers do not feel humanized. What do I mean by that? This is what I mean. Some teachers are expected to always be a teacher no matter what. Like if you're sick, are you still coming in? If you got to use the bathroom, don't ask for a break. You hold it until some teachers some teachers experience that in their school climate. And thankfully that's not how it is in my school. But some teachers don't feel humanized. Some teachers don't feel seen. Some teachers feel like that they can't take care of their human needs. And so one of the challenges is them not feeling humanized. Another challenge is not receiving a professional salary. Like we're in a profession that makes all other professions possible. Yet we get the blunt end of the stick. Like we get the lesser salary. Teachers made the doctors, and doctors get paid wazoos. But then we have teachers that work 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. I was one of those teachers, like to work 2 and 3 jobs within a day just to make your ends meet. Or you're robbing Peter to pay Paul because you still got student loan payments. You still got to make sure you live, especially if you get paid once a month. If you only get paid once a month, by the 16th, 17th, 18th, around that time, you are starting to dwindle with your money, and you really have to like scale back on going out to eat or enjoying your time. So that's a couple of the challenges. Another thing is some teachers don't feel supported by the administration. And so that's causing them to quit. That's causing them to walk away. Teaching can be stressful, especially if you're doing it for the wrong reasons. If you're not in it for the right reasons, teaching can be stressful. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of documentation you have to keep up with on not just one student, but if you have 24 children, you have to keep up with documentation for 24 children, 10 months of the year, every day of the week. Like, it's a lot with that. But if your heart is not in the right place, then that can be a challenge. And so something that I try to do every single day as I walk around my building and I tell my teachers, thank you for showing back up. Good morning. How are you today? Did you have a great weekend? Just humanizing them, making sure that they know that someone in their administration cares about them as a human being. And so one of the teachers, when I first got to the school and I was doing that, and I still do it, she came to me and she said, Mr. Swann, I've been teaching for 29 years and I've never had a principal to come to me every morning and say good morning. She said, you don't know what that means to me. So I appreciate you. And so letting them know that I'm on your team, I got your back. What do you need? You need to use the restroom? Okay, I got your class. Go take a restroom break. Those little things mean the world to teachers because it shows them like, wow, like you care about me as a human first. And so those are some of the challenges within education that you may face, but if you're in it for the right reasons, you'll tunnel through.
Wow, great words of wisdom. Now, last question. Big challenge, because we have a lot of our kids that come into schools because their home environment, let's say, aren't very nurturing. Let's put it mildly. And so these kids come to schools and they've got a lot of emotional baggage that they're carrying around and don't know how to deal with it. So what are your thoughts about corporal punishment in school? Because it's against the law for most states, right, to spank a kid in school. I think they're trying to bring that back. But what's your thought about discipline and corporal punishment?
I have a lot of thoughts when it comes down to that. I feel as though that it will add to the trauma that some students already are experiencing. Like, some students are already feeling abused, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. They're being abused verbally. And so that will add to the trauma that they're already experiencing. And so I would disagree with having corporal punishment within schools, only because there are other measures in which you can help a child to rectify a wrong. But it has to be done correctly.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot just scream and yell at students and expect for them to react. Number one, because they may be already experiencing that at home. And so when they come to school, school is supposed to be a safe haven. It's supposed to be a safe place. The children are supposed to be able to trust you. And so if you bring back corporal punishment, the children won't trust you, which in turn will affect how they react in the classrooms, which in turn will affect their behaviors. So they'll start acting out because they feel like that they're not loved and they can't trust any adult. And because if they start acting out, then it affects their academics. So I would disagree with having corporal punishment to come back in the school systems as a public education entity.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So once again, the optimist in me is just really optimistic because of teachers like you.
Thank you.
Teachers who see beyond the curriculums and all of that, and they see the child and they're committed to that child's growth. And that's more than anything, I think, what this country needs.
Yes, sir.
I think there are obviously a lot of challenges within our society, and how we pay our teachers is one of those challenges that I don't think is addressed enough. And I think we need to figure out a way to increase teacher pay by far, because as you mentioned, you guys are the foundation of all professions.
Mhm.
And so it's imperative that we as a country place more priority on teachers. I just really believe that. But once again, I just want to say thank you for the teacher that you are, for the man that you are. Your commitment to children is commendable. And I'm so glad we've had this opportunity to spend an hour just chatting. Um, and
Wow.
I just also want to say how proud I am of you for for
Thank-
for who you are and what you've done. Means a lot to me as a Black man to see you and what you're doing. And I'm glad I had this opportunity to showcase you and your work on my show. And with that being said, I want to give you now an opportunity just for your closing thoughts to the people who may be watching this and may or may not be thinking about being a teacher, but whatever comes to mind, whatever you want to share, just your final thoughts.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Taylor, for having me on here. It's been a pleasure and an honor. And my final thoughts would be this: no matter your background or where you come from, dream. My career started because I had a dream. I started dreaming about becoming a teacher. I would play school every single day. I mean, even on weekends, even when I was in high school, because I just had this dream that I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to give children what I never had, which was love, consistent love with no motives. And so my advice is dream it, believe it, and go after it, and you shall accomplish it. That will be my final words.
There you go. There's a wonderful book out called The Passion Test. And the authors are they were husband and wife, but I think they've since broke up. But the last name was the Atwoods, but it's called The Passion Test. And it's a really wonderful book. And what it does is it helps you identify your true authentic passions in life. And when I first read the book, I thought my passion was being an entrepreneur, because that's what I've always dreamed of, being an entrepreneur. But after reading that book, what I discovered is my true passion is actually teaching.
Wow.
And I have a different way of doing that. I don't do it in a classroom, but I do it through my books. I do it through speaking engagements, courses that I've developed. And so what I've discovered is I've found that passion and purpose in my life, which is teaching. It is just what I truly love to do.
Awesome.
This show is an extension of me teaching.
Yes, sir.
I'm exposing people to knowledge and wisdom in lots of different ways. So it's another form of teaching. So I wholeheartedly concur with you about dreaming, because I've always dreamed of being an entrepreneur. And so I've taken that dream and become an entrepreneur, and my entrepreneurial pursuits are based on my passion, which is teaching. Because your true purpose will be found at the intersection of that which you love and love to do, and applying it to something the world needs.
Right.
So if you take what you love and you're good at, take something that you love and that you're really good at, and you figure out how to make the world a better place, at that intersection, you'll find your true purpose. So I feel blessed to have found mine, which is teaching.
Me too. Yes.
Well, Anthony, I just want to say again, man, it's been my absolute pleasure and honor. And as we wind down, I just want to say again, thank you, bro, for who you are and how you're showing up in the world. And your commitment to children is commendable. And again, I wish you continued success in everything that you do.
Thank you.
All right. All right. This has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes. And as Anthony said, you got to dream. And I'll add to that, dream big. Don't dream small. Dream big. And you get to decide what big means. But dream big and find your passion, and life will be a joy. We'll see you next episode. Take care.
Take care.